Hello everyone and welcome to another video of RPGs with Paddy. I'm Paddy. So today we're going to be looking at the second scenario from the book The Golden Dawn by Pagan Publishing, and this scenario is called Hell Hath No Fury. This is clearly from the quote, "Heaven has no rage like love to hatred turned, nor hell a fury like a woman scorned." This is from The Morning Bride by William Congreve in 1697. You don't need to check that out, however. It just implies that there is a woman and hell involved. So the investigators are approached by Dr. William Westcott, and he wants the players to help one Jacob Black, who has written to him about help with a curse. That's all I can go into now. So this is the spoiler alert. If you want to experience this as a player, stop watching now. If you're considering running this scenario, or if you are already a keeper and you just want to find out, or if you're a player who has already played through it, let's find out. This scenario is set in March 1894. Dr. Westcott arrives at the house of one of the investigators. An acquaintance has written him the following letter. "Dear Sir, my name is Jacob Black, and I am seeking advice on a most delicate matter. I understand from Maurice Spencer, our mutual friend, that you have the necessary skills and expertise to solve my problem. My problem is, briefly, this. I need someone with the necessary experience to remove a curse that currently hangs over my family. I have considered exorcism, but it is neither ghost nor possession that haunts me. Maurice has implied that you are wise beyond ways common to learned men. I am visiting London on the 15th to 16th of this month, and will be staying at the Railway Hotel opposite St. Pancras Railway Station. If you would be as kind as to meet me there, I will tell you in greater detail of the dire peril which threatens my family. I am prepared to pay whatever fees are required, plus whatever expenses you may incur during the course of your investigation. Yours sincerely, Jacob Black." So again, I just redid this handout, and it's available for free at the link in the description. So Westcott is not in a position to help him, but has already told Black that his associates, the investigators, will meet him at the Railway Hotel tomorrow. Westcott makes it clear that he will be very grateful for their assistance, hinting at benefits within the Golden Dawn. So you meet Jacob Black at the Railway Hotel, and he tells you his story. His ancestor, Sir Edward Black, sentenced a witch to death in 1584. The witch, Black Annie, cursed his family, saying, "And ye shall suffer the curse of Black Annie. Blood shall flow, and the dead shall walk, and ye shall be the last of the line." 2 weeks after Black Annie's death, Sir Edward Black's house burned down, killing the family and many of the servants. One of Sir Edward's sons was abroad, and so the family lived on. Coming back to the present, Jacob Black has never given it much thought. But 3 weeks ago, he had a strange dream where he saw the sentencing of Black Annie. Then he awoke in a bed that he didn't know, and the room was on fire. Finding the exit blocked, he jumped out of the window, and then he woke up again, this time for real, in his own bed. 2 weeks ago, his wife miscarried. 5 days ago, he found blood seeping from the walls. Then he heard that his uncle had died. The maid is complaining about seeing ghosts, the dog has vanished, food spoils overnight, and an inverted pentagram was found carved on the door. So he wants the investigators to check this out. He can put up some of the investigators at his manor and will pay for the others to stay in a local hotel. He will also pay for the party's expenses and make a suitable donation towards the Golden Dawn. The manor, Sycamore Crescent, is in Derbyshire. Oh, and one more thing. The wife, dealing with the stress of this, has gone to live with her relations until the matter is finalized. So, keeper information. Black Annie was killed and she really was a witch, but her body was buried in St. Michael's Chapel, deep into the oak wood. This wood has been protected by an elder sign made by 5 large oak trees. As a result, she did regenerate in her grave, but she couldn't leave the grave. Therefore, she did not cause the death of Sir Edward Black. It was a coincidental fire, although the players are never likely to find out about this unless Black Annie actually reveals it to them, which again is unlikely. 3 weeks ago, the last of the oak trees forming the elder sign was cut down by Randolph Northcote, for reasons to be discussed in a later scenario, Sheila na gig. Randolph Northcote is a former Golden Dawn member, though players should be probably unaware of this. Black Annie cannot leave Oakwood. Its strange magic has stalled the passage of time. If she leaves, the centuries of aging will catch up with her, and she will die. But she has been tormenting Jacob Black from afar using her magic and using witchkin. These are tiny creatures made of clay, and they require human teeth to be created. So, how did the players find her? First, the players will probably go to the manor. They can talk to the maid, who is very stressed. She hasn't seen anything clearly, just strange movements from the corner of her eyes. Jacob also has a study where investigators can find information about the curse and Black Annie and the Black family. They also find that Oakwood Manor, where Sir Edward Black was burnt to death, is now owned by Randolph Northcote, who lives in Hunter's Lodge on the grounds of Oakwood Manor. Players who spend the night at Sycamore Crescent will start having nightmares. They'll notice spoiled food, missing items, and worse. At present, there are about a dozen witchkin in the manor. These are really tiny, tiny creatures. On the morning after the players arrive, Jacob Black receives a telegram saying that his brother has died, leaving him, Jacob Black, as the last remaining member of the Black lineage. The second night the investigators stay, the witchkin will start scratching pentagrams all around the house. This causes the maid to leave, so all future meals are eaten at the local hotel. On the third night, the investigators are awoken by Black screaming. His missing dog has returned and is on his bed. It's clearly dead with a broken neck, but it's moving and wagging its tail. Black insists that the players bury the dead dog, but they will have to chop it to pieces first. I would probably go carefully with this. I know a lot of players would be very uncomfortable with the reanimated dog and cutting it to pieces to bury it, but it's very easy to just leave that out. On the fourth night, Black Annie wants more teeth to make more witchkin. So, the existing witchkin will tie down an investigator to the bed and start removing teeth. There is a cool illustration of this too. The witchkin will try to take 3d6 teeth, but they will flee early if attacked. If nothing has been resolved by the fifth night, Black Annie will send a summoned Biaki to kidnap Jacob Black from his home. As mentioned before, you can also pepper in nighttime mishaps and nightmares, and there are several detailed in the scenario. There are 2 main regions for the players to explore. The first is Helmsdom, which is where Sycamore Crescent, the manor, is. It has a library, an antique shop, a hotel, a pub, and a few other minor locations. The hotel is where players who couldn't stay in the manor will be sleeping. The pub is where you can talk to the locals, but they don't really know much. The library is decent, and there is a very friendly worker there, Old George. He can find documents for any key areas that the players want to investigate. The antique shop sells all kinds of knickknacks, and in my experience, players love picking up useless trinkets, so you can definitely play into this as well. But if the players ask the proprietor about Oakwood, he pulls out this old letter that he found in a desk, which he bought from Randolph Northcote, who lives in Beck Green. He estimates the letter to be about 300 years old, and Randolph Northcote doesn't know about this letter. Parts of the message are unreadable, which I have tried to emulate here. And it reads, Dear Sally, it appears that the trail that began in Garrow on Bleakflower Moor has finally brought us to Beck Green. At last, our journey is over, our task soon complete. This morning we set off into Oakwood. Sergeant Richardson is convinced that she rests, there having spoken at length with the people of this village. I am not so sure, but we take with us shovels too. Sergeant Richardson also has a device with which he will. I myself am in some trepidation, as the wood is known to hide a number of treacherous marshes. I have also heard that the wood hides wolves, and worse. I shall be careful, although it cannot be worse than that dreadful lake at Garrow. I look forward to our next meeting. Your ever faithful Stephen. So there's a couple of mentions of the lake at Garrow here, but that is not brought up anywhere else. You feel free to invent any other scenarios based on that yourself. And again, a free copy of this updated handout is available in the description. So the next region, after they have explored Helmsford a little bit, is to go to Beck Green. And this is the former home of both the Black family and Black Annie. It's a tiny little village with just a few dozen houses, a pub and a church. It also has the burned remains of Oakwood Manor and Hunter's Lodge, both of which hug the edge of Oakwood. In the church, St. Martin's Church, the priest is friendly and has heard of Black Annie, but doesn't believe she was buried on the church grounds. He has never heard of St. Michael's Chapel. I'm bringing this up just because that's how it's presented. St. Michael's Chapel is a really, really key area, but it's not described until much later. So I have some advice at the end of the video about that. If you go to the pub, there is not much information here, but there is an interesting and quite subtle hint. The name of the pub is the 5 Oaks Inn, and the 5 Oaks is made up of the points of the elder sign, well, until now. But the players should make their way to Hunter's Lodge and Randolph Northcote. He is happy to have intelligent company, so he can tell the investigators anything they want to know. He can talk about the Black family and the curse. He can talk about the Oakwood. He says it's very thick and difficult to traverse. If they ask, he claims to have heard of St. Michael's Chapel, but doesn't know where it is. And again, St. Michael's Chapel there's no reason for the players to ask about it yet. So while looking through his notes, because he will gladly share all but the most secretive of his notes, but while looking through the notes, investigators can find an old hand-drawn map that shows the area around Helmston and Beck Green. Over Oakwood, someone has drawn a 5-pointed star, or an inverted pentagram. This is the elder sign built for reasons that will become clear in the next scenario, Sheila na gig. Northcote claims total ignorance about this. Above his desk, there is also a painting of a small church in a wood. On the back, it says St. Michael's Church. A closer look at the picture shows crosses on the trees, which will become important later. The name Melinda Price is scrawled in the corner too. And they can do research about her. It's worth doing the research now because her paintings come up later in another scenario. So if you can kind of build it in now, it will come across as more natural in the next scenario. But basically, she was a painter in the 16th century, and she painted for Sir Edward Black and his aristocratic friends. She was killed in the fire that killed Sir Edward at his house, and her paintings now are quite sought after, mostly because they're rare, not because they're particularly great. She has done a famous series on the Lake District and also another Arthurian series. So Northcote has to head back to London, but he says the investigators are welcome to check out the old manor, but to please be careful as it is dilapidated and dangerous. When they go there, they can't find much, but one room has a painted fresco in one of the most intact inner walls. Closer inspection reveals that it was painted on top of another fresco. The outermost fresco is crumbling in parts, revealing the one beneath it. They are very similar paintings and are like the cover of the Golden Dawn book. The topmost layer shows a wounded knight cradled in the arms of a priest, drinking from a saintly cup, while knights fight against demons. However, the fresco beneath shows the same, except the priest is a wizened old man, the wounds of the knight are more serious and gruesome, and the knights are not fighting demons, but rather other warriors with symbols of Christendom. Relevant roles can identify a similar style to the painting in Northcote's study, identifying this as a painting of Melinda Price. Again, this painting is more relevant in a later scenario. So, if the investigators go into Oakwood, which is the scenario really wants them to, the edges are harmless, and if the players don't have a specific goal for where they want to go in the woods, they will be led astray by the woods themselves, and they will stay on the outskirts and end up on the other side. But they will think that they've gone right through the middle. If they go in with the intention of getting to the center of the woods, they will have to make a POW roll. And if the investigator with the lowest POW succeeds, then they all enter the deep wood. Time passes slowly in the deep wood, and as they start to leave the deep wood, they will notice hunger, thirst, beard growth, etc., indicating that they were inside for much longer than they realized. This could potentially lead to problems such as dehydration and starvation. The deep wood has a few interesting encounters to scare and unsettle investigators. This includes a beast, the sound of a beating heart, seemingly coming from the forest itself, a fungus devouring things, an abandoned stone house, etc. I advise using these liberally. Not only will it unsettle the players, but it will also suggest to them that although the woods look very small on the map, it seems enormous within, supernaturally so. So the goal is to find St. Michael's Chapel. The best way suggested in the book is for them to examine the painting in Hunter's Lodge and notice that the trees around the chapel have crosses carved into them. You can roll to find one of these cross markings once you're inside the wood, and follow that trail to the chapel. Alternatively, you could also locate the 5 oak trees and triangulate to the center of those as the chapel. So upon arriving at the chapel, there is a minimalistic building with a Sheila na gig carving over the entrance. Sheila na gig is described in a player aid here, but we'll talk about that more in the next scenario. At a nearby tombstone, there is a recently opened grave, and it looks as if it was opened from inside the grave, and it was by Black Annie when she was escaping. Inside the chapel is the decapitated body of Sergeant Richardson, the witch hunter mentioned in Freeman's letter. In his hand is a small metal device, and this can be identified as a witch finder. And it's basically the only way to find Black Annie. There is also something else in the church which hints towards the following scenario, Sheila na gig. It's probably worth including in your playthrough as it's good foreshadowing, but it might be a little bit confusing for the players if there's not a conclusion this time. So in the scenario, it just moves on to when you find the cottage, but to find the cottage, the only way to do it is with the witch finder. So you'll actually have to go back to town and go to the antique shop and have Freeman repair it there and figure out how to work it. But we'll talk about that a little bit later. But once you do find the cottage, it is sitting beneath a huge oak tree, and you'll notice flapping shapes hanging from the tree, and they are human skins. Initially, I thought this didn't make sense, or you'd have to talk about recent disappearances like in Beck Green and Helmsdom. People were talking about a few people having gone missing. But given the time distortion in the Deepwood, it doesn't actually need any more explanation as to whose skin it is. But of course, you could add it in. Black Annie has also set up an alarm system where the pheasants have been decapitated and their heads nailed to the ground with sharp sticks. They will squawk to let Annie know when someone is arriving. And so again, the scenario says that Annie is elsewhere when they arrive, but I find this hard to understand. The only way to find her, per the scenario, is with the Witchfinder. And that should presumably point towards her, not her cottage. The scenario explains that there is a Byakhee there, however, and it will attack. If Jacob Black has been kidnapped, he will be found hanging from the tree, unconscious and bleeding. He needs to be carried out of the woods, and if it takes more than a day since his kidnapping, he will die. If you've forgotten, on the 5th night, if nothing has happened, Black Annie will send the Byakhee to kidnap him from the house. But, of course, then Black Annie arrives, and there's a very nice creepy description of her. She will attack immediately using magical attacks to cripple the investigators. She wants to skin them alive for her tree. So Black Annie can't be killed completely by normal means. She recovers 1 HP per hour. So if she is reduced to 0 HP, it may seem that she is dead, but she will recover. You have to kill her either with magic or remove her from the woods, and at which point the years will catch up with her and she will crumble to pieces. So after this, the investigators should return to London in time for the vernal equinox ritual for the Golden Dawn on March the 21st. Westcott will want to debrief them before that. He will thank them for their efforts, and assuming they have his blessing, he will surprise them with a special reward, making them ritual officers for the next 6 months. And again, these are described more in the information section. He will give better positions to those who are already in the inner order, those who are Masons, even though that's a secret, and those who Jacob Black singled out as being particularly helpful, if any. Okay, and so that is the scenario, but there are a few other things. First of all, there's a few sidetrack things that you can add or remove. Notably, there is some reference to the Wolf Murders and the Merlin Caves. They actually have nothing to do with the scenario, but they give you a little bit of inspiration to make your own scenarios building off of that. But yeah, I think it's simple enough to just leave them out or include them depending on the amount of time you have for your players. So overall, I think it's a nice and straightforward scenario and a decent mystery to solve. But there are a few points that I think need work. Number one, it is of the utmost importance that the players find St. Michael's Chapel. Without that, they can't find the Witchfinder, and without the Witchfinder, they can't find Black Annie, at least as the scenario is written. However, there is no reason for the investigators to want to find St. Michael's Chapel. The only connection is a picture of the chapel in Northcote's house. But there's no real reason for the investigators to want to go there or to think that it's important. Basically, they're at someone's house and they see a painting of a chapel in the woods. So I really think you should have some hints that Black Annie was buried at St. Michael's Chapel. Maybe have some of the townsfolk or an old historian or an old record say something about it. And you can even have a little bit of misdirection. For example, if it comes up in some research that she was buried at St. Michael's Chapel, but when they arrive in Beck Green, they find St. Martin's Church. And then they think, oh, maybe the name has changed, or maybe the person writing it, wrote it incorrectly. And then maybe a town drunk can talk about the history, or there's some secret that they don't talk about, or they find some lost parchment talking about carrying Black Annie off to the woods. Then, when they see the painting in Northcote's study, it will at least ring some bells. But until then, or as the scenario reads, there's no reason why they should want to find out about St. Michael's Chapel or Oakwood in general. So, second part is the players must have the Witchfinder, because walking around the Oakwood is it will mislead you anyway. Of course, you could have them just stumble upon it. I actually think that the Witchfinder is good, because it gives the players an excuse, a reason to leave the Oakwood and find out about it. And that also shows them the strange passage of time within the Oakwood. But to find out about Sergeant Richardson, really, and the Witchfinder, of course you will stumble across him, that's fine. But to find out about him, with the secret letter, you have to ask in the antiques shop about Oakwood. And again, there's no real reason why you would ask about Oakwood. So definitely pepper in some suggestions that people think there's something strange about those woods. Definitely have that a little bit, maybe even a little bit heavy-handed. And of course, if you want the players to think to go back to the antiques shop to get stuff fixed up, it's really important to foreshadow that as well, because they might not know that the Witchfinder is broken. So two things that I would say. One is, when you're in the antiques shop, make sure that the antiques dealer, Freeman, I think, he says something like, make sure you come back and show me anything interesting you find while you're out there. Or even something less heavy-handed than that. Another way, I think, is to have some kind of machine that protects against witches in Jacob Black's house when the players arrive. Then the Witchkin will break it on the first night, or, something happens to it that night. Then Jacob asks the players to bring it to the antiques shop to have it repaired. And this introduces them to the NPC Freeman, and it also sets in their mind, he can fix strange broken items. And finally, the last thing that I think really needs to be addressed is when the Witchfinder points towards Black Annie, I really feel it shouldn't just go to her empty house. Unless the players, haven't been actively using it right up to that point. The Witchfinder spell only lasts for 1 minute, so it does require multiple castings. But each one of these castings uses MP. There'll be an MP loss and a sanity loss. I feel like it's a bit of a cheat to charge the players their MP and their sanity to find the witch using the Witchfinder, and then it brings them to just her house and she's not there. But those, I wouldn't call them exactly minor. They're fairly major issues, but they're easy to fix. I think if you don't include those fixes, there's not so much structure and the players don't know what they're supposed to be doing. And the investigation comes down to a lot of bottlenecks. If you don't have this, you can't go to the next part. So I think just including a little bit of that foreshadowing and hinting at these things in the run-up will make it run very smoothly. And apart from that, I think it is a very satisfying and potentially deadly scenario for your investigators. Not only the foreshadowing that I mentioned, but you can also use a lot of foreshadowing for a future scenario, Sheila na gig, which takes place years later. So be sure to check out my upcoming video on that as well. Alright, so that is going to do it for now. Don't forget to like and subscribe. I would really appreciate it. And if you've played this scenario, I'd love to hear how it went in the comments below. And if you have your own tips or tricks to share, please share them so other keepers know how they can run this better or more smoothly. The next video in this series is going to be the next scenario chronologically, which is La Musique de la Nuit, before I finish up with the fourth and final scenario in this book, Sheila na gig. Okay, so that's it for today. Happy New Year, everyone, and I will see you next time.